We are on.
We're live.
Yes.
So today's motorcycle therapy update is streaming live from quarantine in Calgary, Alberta, Canada.
Correct. So we're going to tell you today about what it was like getting here from Uruguay back to Canada, how we managed to get here because it wasn't a very direct route, and what it's like to be here in quarantine times.
We're going to also talk about our decision to ship our motorcycles home from Uruguay to Canada, and that wasn't an easy decision to make. We'll talk a little bit about the details there. And of course, we're going to answer questions that you send in to the comment box.
Mm-hmm.
So get those in and we'll try to address them when we can. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. That'd be great if you do that. And check out the description below on this video. I'll leave links to everything that we're talking about, including our Instagram and Twitter.
If you want to follow us there.
Yeah, and of course, I have some books that I will link to in the description below. And what else do we just say? Oh yeah, so here's Elle with a bit of a recap.
So we left Canada back in August of 2019. We rode our motorcycles from Canada all the way down to the southern tip of Argentina. Boat gap from Panama to Colombia, the same boat that our bikes were on, which was awesome. We kept going south from Colombia down, which was brutal and windy. Like they say, the winds in Patagonia really are brutal. And once we got to Ushuaia, the southernmost town that you can get to by road, we started to make our way north again after a side trip to Argentina. And once we started going north, we made it to Buenos Aires. We rested for a bit, met a friend. And as soon as we got across the river from Buenos Aires into Uruguay, we got stuck. The borders closed around us and there was no leaving or entering any other countries. So we decided to wait, and we ended up waiting 5 months in Uruguay.
Yeah, we were basically trapped in Uruguay for 5 months. And I say trapped, it was a great place to be. Uruguay
Beautiful.
is a fantastic little country, very welcoming. But we got kicked out of this hostel and that hotel, and
we weren't sure where we were going to even sleep that night.
Yeah, so eventually we rented an Airbnb and we kind of hunkered down for basically a few months.
Jeremy thought a month would be good, so we rented an Airbnb, and I was like, no way, we won't need a whole month. They're saying that maybe people will need to stay in place for 2 weeks, and of course you could guess it might be a little longer than that, but so what if it's 4 weeks or 6 weeks? We can manage, we can wait. That's what we're doing, is spending money and time on the road anyway. So what if we stay in one place for a little bit? Mm-hmm. I had no idea that 5 months later, it would still be what it's like today.
Yeah, and we kind of began realizing that our intended route home, the whole time we were planning this trip, it was supposed to be an out and back. And then we realized after a few months that we weren't going to ride home. So we ended
Jeremy knew. It took me a little longer to let that sink in.
Yeah, so we had to make some hard decisions about what to do with our motorcycles and how to get ourselves home.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you have been watching my other YouTube videos and our little updates from Uruguay.
Mm-hmm.
And some of you have been commenting on the roundabout route that we took home for ourselves.
There's a lot of suggestions for different ways that we could have flown. And basically, we were stuck waiting for any possible flight options. Once we figured out shipping for our bikes and we were looking at just getting ourselves back, the problem was that most international flights leave Uruguay and go to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and then from there to the States and then Canada. Well, the United States has a ban on any flights coming from Brazil, so we couldn't do that. There was an option of one that would have gone to Santiago, Chile, and then States. We could have done that if it was available, but the whole month that we were looking to fly, that wasn't an option. Then there was one from Montevideo to Sao Paulo, Brazil, and then Mexico City, and then right over the States to Canada, but that was not an option when we booked. So we actually went through Europe.
Yeah.
4 days, 49 hours, 4 flights, 3 continents just to get back to Canada.
It was kind of ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, I was reading some of the comments here.
About your freshly shaved beard.
Yes, I've got a freshly shorn face. And Pete, Garbage Man Pete, was asking about my coveralls.
Uh-huh.
That was, speaking of Garbage Man Pete, that was part of the reason for our, I wouldn't say rush to get home, but we were on a bit of a deadline. I have a job. They graciously let me go for a year. I work for the town of Canmore, and they were very good to me, and they let me go for a year. But that deadline to return to work was approaching. So if we had more time and more money, we could have waited for an entire year maybe and lived in Uruguay and tried to ride home after that. But we had to get home. And that's also why we took a bit of a roundabout way to get home. There were no direct flights, and there were no no possibilities to link through the States, like Elle was saying.
Yeah, you either had to avoid Brazil or the States or both. So we did both.
So we flew across the Atlantic Ocean twice. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we now? Some of you are wondering. We are in quarantine.
We're in a garage.
Yeah, you can see.
So that ladder goes up to a loft, and that's where there's a bed to sleep in up in the loft. And then that garage door is open, so we get some fresh air and light right now.
Yeah, a friend of ours here in Inglewood in Calgary was gracious enough to kind of in haste renovate his garage for us. So there's
put in a sink, and there's a fridge and a counter and everything we need in here, really. That's his BMW right there.
We've got a little porta potty set up for ourselves, and it's
not fancy, but it works.
It's a pretty basic accommodation. But anyway, Canada requires travelers from abroad to quarantine and isolate for 2 weeks.
14 days.
So this is what we're doing, and during that 14 days, we're not allowed to have any visitors, including people coming to our backyard, and like they can't even come.
Even if we sit outside in the fresh air, 2 meters apart from each other, we're still not allowed to have visitors.
So the way we're getting food and groceries is we have some family and friends who are willing to do grocery runs for us.
Yes, thank goodness.
We can do takeout food as long as we don't come into direct contact with anyone. And that's how we've been eating.
And they not just groceries, but chocolate, the all-important items.
Yeah. I'm just reading some of the comments here now.
Hey, Alan, how's it going?
So that's our life. We're in a garage for 2 weeks. I'm playing a lot of guitar, but my mind is a little bit foggy for several reasons. I wouldn't call it jet lag exactly, but I would say we're still a bit road weary and trying to process coming back to Canada in such a manner. We were never planning on arriving by plane.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff to process. And Elle and I have been together for a year on this trip, sometimes in pretty close quarters. Never more close quarters than what we're in right now, like for a forced amount of time. Right?
I would say that little apartment in Colonia, Uruguay, when we first settled in and we weren't sure what was going on with the world and we decided to stay in place as much as possible, that was tiny. That was a 315 square foot apartment.
It was
I would say it was smaller than this.
But we could go to the ocean.
You're right. We could go for a walk around the block and go sit at the ocean once.
Officials call to check on us. Now, the problem with that is we've been gone for a year. So both of us let our cell phones lapse. And
sorry if we dropped out there for a sec. We're back.
I think that only happens on our end.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, we'll keep talking. And if we break up, then we break up. Not break up. You know what I'm talking about.
The connection.
Yeah.
You were saying?
Well, our cell phone plans lapsed.
Oh, yeah.
In order to come back to Canada, we had to provide all this information to government officials.
And it's a form.
And one of the main things was
a
cell phone number. So we didn't have that. We had WhatsApp. They could have called us using that. We had email, or we could have borrowed a friend's phone to call them, but none of that was an option.
Yeah. So we have a friend's phone number who's trying to not touch us or touch the phone at the same time as us when there's a call. But we've got a few calls, one from the government of Canada, one from the province of Alberta, and we were told to expect maybe a couple more. Hi, Stefan and Jane. Thanks for tuning in. There's a few people that want to know if there's going to be a movie or a book. Jeremy's the author, as you know. He's written a couple books already.
And I've also been doing most of the film editing. So check out some of the films, short films that I've been doing about the trip. I don't think there will be any long form one, but there may be, you never know. Or Canada Moto Guide. I've been writing and that is all in the link in the description below. As for me writing another book, I don't know if that's going to happen. But if it does happen, the answer to your question is no, I cannot. Urban GS Adventures, I can't write the book in 2 weeks. I can barely write an article in 2 weeks. And someone's asking about our experience in Montevideo, and did we experience any situation of insecurity? Absolutely not.
In Uruguay, not at all. And in fact, someone was asking about what it's like to be back and how do we feel with this familiar Calgary territory, but after being away for a year. Montevideo was beautiful. Montevideo is a robust city with all kinds of services available. Not always chocolate, because I know everybody loves dulce de leche, but aside from a few different types of food that I was looking for like that, it really felt like a very modern city and not all that different from here in Calgary. It was chilly. I'm glad to be in a little bit warmer climate. It's summer here while it's winter down there in South America, but I had no insecurities or issues of safety at all while I was in Uruguay anywhere. We had some good trips out of Montevideo to Cabo Polonio, which is a beautiful little town with no electricity and no roads to get to. You have to hop on this giant cruiser with huge wheels to go over the sand dunes to get to the town, which is really beautiful. I would say that's one of our best experiences there.
One of the highlights for me of the entire experience in Uruguay was Cabo Polonio, and the wildlife, and again, the ride in was fantastic. And the people have always been very helpful and friendly.
Very helpful and welcoming.
Yeah.
I particularly was on Facebook and looking around at different travelers quite a bit when the pandemic first was declared, and we decided to rent an Airbnb and stay still in Uruguay. I was worried about what would happen next, and could we travel again, and would it be safe if the borders opened to go all the way back to Canada by bike? And I was reading stories from other travelers, and not all of them were very good. I'd heard stories about people who were literally denied entry to town by police officers, and they were told, but I need to get here in order to keep going to get to where my home is. And the police said, no, you're a foreigner. You literally cannot come into town. Well, where will I go? Don't care. Not our problem. Just you can't be here. I'd heard
that's the same thing that happened to Rambo in First Blood, right?
And I heard stories of people questioning their neighbors if they hosted people through their Airbnb and wanting to see their passports and see photos of the stamps in their passports to know if they should worry about how recently they'd been in the country or not. So I was a little worried about how well received we would be in Uruguay. And it turns out we had no reason to worry at all. The people who hosted us at that Airbnb were super helpful.
Yeah. Well, and Uruguay has done, out of all the countries in the world, Uruguay gets top marks for how they've handled COVID-19. So they weren't actually that alarmed at the presence of foreigners because they knew, now we got this, and they did. So I'm seeing some questions here, and we want to talk about it anyway, about shipping the motorcycles home.
Crazy expensive that it was.
Well, was it crazy expensive? And first of all, let's talk about the decision to do that in the first place. So one of my other videos covered this, but we were looking at 4 main options for getting ourselves home from Uruguay. The first option, our preferred option, was riding home. And we were holding out hope for that. Elle was holding out more hope for longer. But I realized that wasn't happening. So then we were left with 3 options. Storing the motorcycles in Uruguay, but that meant we would have to return for them at a later date. The other option was selling the bike. I could have probably done that. I have a KLR 650, and they are in demand there. But the person who buys it could not legally register it. So I would get a very low price, and it was a little bit shady legally. And then the other option was shipping the motorcycles home. And that provided a bunch of other obstacles and expenses, and we agonized over that decision for a long time.
Jeremy, I think, was leaning more towards selling his if he could have gotten even a half decent price. It would have been a lot harder for me to get any kind of price and for anyone to buy it there. So I was leaning a little bit towards storing the bikes and coming back for them later. But the more months this went on and the longer it took, the more I realized it's probably not going to be the option to travel all the way from Uruguay to Canada is probably not going to be available anytime soon. It might be another year from now before that's available. So flying back, spending money on flights to then ride my bike out of the country, back in again to renew the permit, to have it stay in the country and store it again, and maybe be without my bike here in Canada for 2 seasons wasn't something I really wanted to do. So when we started looking into shipping, Jeremy did a little bit of research. And the very first quote that you got, Jeremy?
Oh yeah, when I first started the research on shipping motorcycles home, the quote that I got was $9,000 US, wasn't it?
Yes.
Per motorcycle.
It was insane. So first it was half that, but then they were like, no, they couldn't be stacked on top of each other in the cargo, so they would actually be double that. So $9,000 each, US dollars. That was just automatically, even worth that much.
Yeah, and Elle is right. We're ready to sell my bike to, and when I heard that number, I was ready to push my motorcycle into the ocean.
Yeah, he was ready to just shove it into a ditch, maybe grind the serial numbers off and just walk away and leave it. Me, I just sank. Like when you told me that number, my heart just sank.
Of course, I'm joking, by the way. I'm a bit of an environmentalist myself. Even though we do ride motorcycles and fly, that's not exactly the most environmentally sensitive way to move around. But joking about the pushing into the ocean thing, let me be clear about that. But I was willing to abandon my motorcycle or sell it. But I did a little bit more digging and I found a few more companies,
Mhm.
and we checked, of course, with iOverlander,
Yes.
and we checked with Horizons Unlimited,
Mhm.
horizonsunlimited.com. They're friends of ours.
Mhm.
And we asked for advice from some other world travelers that we know, who do you recommend? And
And we did a few cold calls as well. I
right.
just Googled Vancouver Harbor, who are some freight forwarders, and I just started randomly emailing and calling people.
Yeah. And one of the people that was recommended to us, one of the companies, was Air Canada Cargo.
Yeah.
And they gave us a great price.
Mhm.
And they said, yep, we can ship your motorcycles home.
Air
No,
freight.
we don't go from Uruguay.
Yes.
But we will ship from Chile. We'll ship
Lima.
from Lima, Peru, and we will ship from Colombia. Well, that's great. If the borders are open, we could do that. So that was not an option. We could not access the more common shipping hubs, including Buenos Aires, right?
Yes, there was a few companies that could have helped us if we could have got to Buenos Aires, like Dakar Motos or Moto Birds, but we couldn't get to Buenos Aires. Borders were closed.
So, yeah, the search continued, and we got more and more quotes. And I can't, I don't even know how much to talk about the shipping process because it's in motion. Our bikes are on their way. We've tried to pay the shipper, but I don't know if
we paid. We've hopefully paid. It's just all the numbers on the bill and all the numbers for the account number are a little bit confusing.
Yeah, so
it's all good.
We were in receipt of the invoice, and some numbers we had to look up online.
It's all good, Jeremy. I swear. Did your guitar show up when you weren't sure it would?
Yeah.
So this is going to show up too.
I was stressed about $100.
Our bikes are going to show up.
I'm not worried about the bike showing up. I'm worried about our payment, and maybe we'll have to repay.
I know. Shh.
Okay.
It's all good. So how do we choose this shipper?
Well, we're kind of beating around the question of how much.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, basically, there was multiple quotes, and lots of them were very expensive. We narrowed it down to two, actually three, who were among the cheapest. And then we decided to go with Olaf because you knew somebody who knew him, right?
That's right. So I found somebody on Horizons Unlimited who was offering to ship motorcycles. His name was Olaf. I can't pronounce his last name properly.
Something.
Well, let's not butcher his last name.
Okay.
It's German, and his company is called In Time Forwarding.
Right.
When I went to look at his website, it wasn't there. So we could email him, but the website was down. So
which doesn't inspire a lot of confidence.
I felt it was a little bit suspect. So I started asking around, and years ago, Stefan Knopf of Knopf Tours, also a German company, really helped me out when I shipped my motorcycle from Calgary to Germany. And so I emailed him and I said, do you know this guy Olaf? And he's like, oh yeah, good guy. So I'm like, oh, okay, that makes me feel so much better. So now that I had a personal recommendation, we emailed back and forth with Olaf, and he said, yep, we can ship your bikes, no problem. No, you don't have to build a crate.
Yeah, that made a big difference. So we did talk with a couple other people that were personally recommended. One that was personally recommended by friends that we met in Uruguay, and then another that I just ended up chatting with on Facebook. And one of the things that kept coming up was the cost of the crate that needed to be built. And the smaller that we could have made the crate, the more money we could have saved in the space. But I wanted to include some luggage. I didn't want to carry all my motorcycle luggage and my helmet and my motorcycle gear and everything with me on the airplanes back home. And the crates, I thought, well, I'll just build them myself. Like, we have time. We're sitting here waiting. I can do that and save a few bucks. But in Uruguay, it needs to be pressure treated, and it needs to be fumigated, and it needs to be inspected and stamped. And then as a foreigner, if I buy pressure treated fumigated wood in Uruguay, it would cost me 22% extra. So it turned out that building it myself would not have saved hardly any money at all. So one of the bonuses of going with Olaf is we didn't need any crates. We just had a 20-foot container to ourselves, 2 motorbikes, all the luggage we wanted to shove in there, no problem, and strapped them down inside the crate. And we got to see them do. We get to see that happen, which I was really glad to see. They were like, since you're here, do you want to watch? And I'm like, yeah. So we watched them strap him down, and with the doors of the container still open, they picked it up and rocked it back and forth, side to side, so we can make sure nothing wiggled and feel good about how they were getting crated.
Now, to answer the question,
money.
Again, we've been beating around the bush. So the grand total for 2 motorcycles shipped home without crates on a ocean-going vessel. Someone was asking if we flew them home or if it was on a container ship. The total for both bikes was about 7,000 Canadian dollars.
4,000 and something euros, which turns into 6,600 Canadian dollars. So
what did I say?
You said 7.
I said about 7.
You did. I just want to be clear. And come on. It made a difference. And when we were comparing prices to others, it made a difference. So
now,
split that between 2 bikes, we were paying 3,300 each Canadian.
And what is my KLR 650 worth? Maybe 3,500. So
maybe 4. Maybe
basically
4.5.
Yeah. So this is why I was on the fence about what to do with my motorcycle. If I had sold my KLR 650 in Uruguay, I would have gotten about 1,500 American dollars, but I would have saved 3,500 Canadian dollars in shipping. So for me, that would have been better. However, the only way it made sense for Elle to ship her bike home, because she was kind of chained to it.
In love with it.
In love with it. If I got rid of my bike, that would double her expense.
Yes.
And as a soft-hearted, good boyfriend,
who also is glad to have your motorcycle and not needing to buy a new one when you're broke.
No.
Okay.
I decided to ship home along with Elle. There was actually another company that would have built a crate and shipped home for similar cost.
Yes.
And that wouldn't have been split between us. So I actually probably could have sold my bike. Wouldn't have cost you more. But we were starting to make decisions and feel a little bit of the pull to get home before winter.
$50. There's your best offer, Jeremy.
What's that?
They'll give you $50 for it.
I don't know, Pete.
And there we go. That is a great price. Yeah, actually, I've chatted with a few other people who did leave their motorhome quickly because they needed to. And then now they're either flying back to pick up their motorcycle, which they still can't cross borders with, or just having it shipped. And we've heard some prices that are much more expensive.
And also very lucky. So we were lucky to be stuck in Uruguay.
Of all the countries in South America, yes.
We had time, so we didn't need to make any hurried decisions. And then we got lucky again by finding the right shipper and things like that.
Yeah. I agree. If we would have made a decision really quickly to get home, I probably would have stored my bike and have flown home. And now I would be realizing, oh, even if I go back for my motorcycle, I'm still not going to be able to ride it to Canada anytime soon. So I would have been paying to go back and forth a couple times.
So now hopefully definitely our motorcycles are on the way to Vancouver. So once we're done with our 2-week quarantine.
And we get some haircuts.
Well, yeah, that's partly why I'm wearing this thing. Once we get done with our quarantine, then we have to do a road trip to Vancouver to pick up our motorcycles, and then it'll be mid to late September. So snow is a very real possibility in the mountains in Vancouver. So hopefully we can ride home.
Yes, that's one thing that is like keeping my spirits up, is knowing that we're not quite done yet. I consider that the trip isn't officially finished until my motorcycle gets back to Calgary, where I started from.
Thank you, everyone who's wishing us safe passage and welcome back and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, we are happy with our decision. And what else do we want to talk about before we address some questions?
Someone asked about the bikes. When you pick them back up out of the cargo ship, then what happens? Jeremy's bike isn't very old. It's a 2016.
Yep.
So it's in pretty good shape. You're ready to just ride it as soon as you pick it up, right?
Yeah, well, I need to put a new battery in.
Oh,
so
yes.
In Peru, I had nothing but problems with my motorcycle. We had to push start it a lot.
And not just in Peru.
Right. Well, so in Peru, I decided to replace my battery.
Yes.
And the entire, where were we? Ollantaytambo?
Yeah.
The entire valley had nothing for me in way of batteries.
Yeah. We had to travel to 3 different towns to find a place that actually had a battery.
So I finally found the only battery that I could find. And they even said when they were selling it to me, they were like, do you want this battery? Because it's really garbage. And I was like, I need it. So my battery is shot.
If you've seen some of the previous videos we've put out on Jeremy's channel for this, you've seen lots of footage of us push starting his bike.
That's right. I've got lots of footage of me push starting the motorcycle. So what I plan to do is buy a brand new battery, maybe here in Calgary, maybe in Vancouver, have it fully charged and show up with it at customs. And then we just put it in, and I should be able to just fire up the bike and ride away.
And my bike's pretty good as well. It did start to develop an oil leak, which I'm very unhappy about. BMWs are famous for being great with this, and 130,000 kilometers. It's never needed oil. Like, I don't even need to top it up in between changes. So much so that I forgot how to check my oil. I forgot if it was like a dipstick or a sight glass, because I don't check it, because I almost never need to.
You should always check your oil.
I should. Yes, Jeremy. So now I know very well, because I've been checking it lots since it started dripping. So I might be needing, I'm hoping something as simple as just a new gasket. But other than that, yeah, she's still in great shape and ready to keep riding.
Mm-hmm. Joshua is asking, from a scale of 1 to 10, what's your tolerance of each other now that this trip? Well, ask us in 13 more days.
Yeah, after quarantine.
I would say that I mean, obviously you're right here.
Mm-hmm. So you guys say nice things in front of me.
Yeah, but I would honestly say that I have grown more fond of Elle West.
Over the trip or over the quarantine? Or
over the entire year, yep. And you don't need to answer. So just you don't need to answer. I don't want to hear it. But I feel blessed, and there's no one that I'd rather be in quarantine with, although it is still, it's stressful being in this garage for 2 weeks.
There are moments. I would say that Jeremy and I did great traveling together, which was the closest we've been since we've known each other. And then being stuck in Uruguay together for, wasn't really quarantine, but our kind of staying at home as much as possible time. We did really well with that, better than I was expecting.
Yep.
And now it feels like it shouldn't be any different. Like, if we can do all that, we can do this no problem. And it's only 14 days. Of course we should be able to do this. But there's still moments when I'm just like itching to have a little bit more distance.
Yeah, me too. And it's not because of each other's personalities. It's just the situation and the stress that we've been under. The 48 hours that it took us to get from Uruguay to Europe and then back to North America and then here without much sleep and with no food. Well, I shouldn't say no food.
McDonald's and airport food.
The airlines are not providing food like they used to.
You get a brown paper bag with a couple snacks and granola bars in it.
Anyway, so since that has happened and we've been under some stress and some sleep deprivation and stuff like that, I would say that, you know, tensions are slightly high. I find myself fairly easily irritated. But Garbage Man Pete might still be watching. He knows that I'm fairly easily irritated anyway.
We've developed a couple little techniques since the time in Uruguay, and that's just wearing earbuds, even though you're not listening to any music or anything at all. It's kind of a signal that means, like, I'm busy. And even though I'm right here 3 feet away from you, don't keep interrupting me with questions. Just let me have some space and time to myself.
Yeah.
It's like an imaginary little cubicle.
And speaking of space and time, like today I spent probably 45 minutes pacing like a caged wolf, like just going back and forth and back and forth. It's a small space, and it is frustrating.
I'm really good at doing nothing. I can sleep in, I can lay in the sun. We have a little bit of yard out there, so sunshine is something I'm very happy to have.
Somebody else that asked a question that I wanted to address, but maybe now I've lost it. So keep your questions coming in. We're going to try to get to them.
No changes for the KLR. Someone asked about the Darien Gap.
Oh yeah, that's the one.
We took a boat called the Stahlrat. Again, my German is horrible. Don't copy my.
Stahlrat.
There you go. And they had 18 different motorcycles on board that ship. And they specialize in taking motorcycles, so they were great. They put us on a little island. They gave us some food and sunshine and left us alone. Then they went back to put all the bikes on board. They covered them all. They put little bits of cardboard and styrofoam so that the two bike motorcycles strapped side by side didn't rub against each other. And then when we got to Colombia, everything was taken care of. That was a really nice thing for me, is we paid one price. Our bikes got passage, we got passage. We had all our food included. We had a pretty decent bed. It's just a bunk bed. It's not a fancy cabin to yourself. And then we got to go swimming off the deck of the boat. And when we arrived in Colombia, all our paperwork was taken care of. We had 1 month's insurance on each motorcycle, and all our import was taken care of already. So I would recommend the Stahlrat.
Absolutely. Remind me to address the question of the two brothers that we interviewed.
Okay.
But let me talk about the Stahlrat as well.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah, Stahlrat, absolutely highly recommend using that service. It was one of the highlights of the trip. I spent a lot of time out above, in front of the boat. They had a net underneath the bowsprit,
like
I guess it's called.
Giant hammock.
Like a giant hammock. And I just lay out there, and I was ahead of the ship and just looking down the blue waters. And every now and then dolphins would come, and they would swim right
in front,
right below. And we met some really good friends.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them might be watching now.
Mm-hmm.
Off the top of, I can't list them all, but off the top of my head, Russ
Yes.
is now a good friend of mine.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good way to meet other bikers if you're interested, because most of them were doing the same thing we were, leaving North America, coming to South America to do the ride, hopefully all the way down to Ushuaia. We met a few of them again later on in our trip, some of them in Ushuaia, some of them in Colombia, and a couple at the end of our trip in Buenos Aires, where they shipped back to Europe from there.
Russ, my friend that I was referring to, he actually crashed his motorcycle in Peru and broke his collarbone. He's okay. He's an American guy, so he's
back at home.
And speaking of Americans, this is the question that I wanted to address. Okay. Someone asked about the two brothers that we interviewed.
Yeah, Kirk and Clay.
I've got a link to that interview in the description below. Please check out the description below. There's a bunch of links there. And I linked to an interview, two brothers traveling together from North America all the way to South America. And one of them was traveling in a van and one of them was traveling on a motorcycle.
And that van was customized beautifully.
The gentleman, Kirk Williams, the one that was in the van, he's a quadriplegic. And so his brother, Clay, was traveling on the motorcycle, and they worked great as a team and overcoming some pretty intense obstacles. And so the question was, what happened to those guys? Yeah, they also shipped their vehicles home.
We were kind of like quarantine buddies. I felt like even though we couldn't see them anymore, they were across the river in Buenos Aires. Sometimes we waved at them across the river, even though they couldn't see. And it felt like we built some kinship in like deciding how long we would wait. And close to the same time, we both decided that shipping was an option. I think they had a couple more options available to them, being in Buenos Aires.
Being in Buenos Aires, yeah, they had cheaper shipping options as well. So. But yeah, they shipped home and they're fine. So they're Americans and they flew back to the States. And unlike Canada, there is no restrictions on those guys.
No quarantine. Once they arrived, they were good to go and they're free now. So go check out impact.overland. That's the way to follow Kirk and see some of his fabulous photos. He's a great photographer, and read up on a little bit of his story and why he chose to travel the way he did and how he does it.
Craig, yes, I would love to go back to Horizons Unlimited in California. I've had nothing but good times there whenever I've gone. I guess it's been canceled this year, and I imagine all over the world events are being canceled. What else do we want to talk about, Elle?
Well, we could talk a little bit about being in quarantine, what it's like, how we're stuck here. We guess we already addressed that a little bit. Thanks to my sister, who brought chocolate and made homemade brownies with homemade whipped cream for me as soon as I landed. Thanks to Brian Bailey, who is the guy who does the music for the videos that you've been putting on YouTube, right?
That's right. We talked about some of our trip highlights, the Stahlrad.
Yes.
And also Antarctica. So it seems like a lot of the highlights on this trip have involved ocean-going vessels.
Yes.
We were in the southern tip of South America after reaching Ushuaia, and we were again agonizing over what to do. They have these last-minute deals that you can go to the Antarctic, and if you don't book in advance, if you book last-minute deals, they've got openings sometimes, and they sell them for cheap. But cheap is still pretty expensive.
Yes. And I think one of the problems that we had was we didn't want to wait too long, because we were on our way back to Buenos Aires to meet a friend who was flying down from Canada to meet us. So we couldn't really not show up for that date. And then once we told him we were restricted to these dates, the guy showed us a few different ships that had a few different plans for Antarctica. And one of them was really, really nice. Like one of them would have been a berth where we were separated. There was like a women's berth and a men's berth, and it was a bunk bed situation with 6 different people sharing your room and no window, maybe just like a porthole through to look outside from your bedroom. Or this other one would have had a private room with a private balcony in your bedroom. So you could get out of bed, open the curtains, slide the sliding door open, be on your own private balcony and watch icebergs and humpback whales go by right outside your balcony. So of course that was still a last minute deal and way better than regular price, but a little bit more expensive than the other option we were looking at.
Yeah. And again, it was a difficult decision, and this was pre-COVID as well. So we didn't know what was about to happen. We booked that expensive one, and we lived in luxury for like 10 days.
Yes.
And it was a ridiculously good experience. And then after that, borders closed and we were stuck. And I'm so glad we did it, even though we couldn't afford it. And we're still kind of paying for that in a way.
Financially, yes.
Like Elle and I came home burning fumes financially.
Mhm.
Now, we're fortunate. I've got a job waiting for me, and
You got a line of credit.
yeah, we've got a line of credit and things
Mhm.
like that. But I'm still glad that we did it.
Absolutely. On the way down, we kept saying, we're not just doing one way, we're doing both ways. So we want to kind of get to Patagonia before it gets too cold. We want to kind of hurry up our pace and not dawdle too much. So we didn't see the Galapagos Islands. We didn't see any of the Amazon at all. We almost didn't see Machu Picchu until I pushed and said, let's do at least one thing on our way down and not save it all for the way back.
And I'm so glad we did that.
So there's a lot of things that we missed on our way down. Now that I know we're not going to have a chance to see any of those things for a long time because we're out of money now. And even if the borders open and we can travel again soon, it's going to be a while before we can get back on the road to any significant distance. I'm glad we went to Antarctica. We've got those photos. We've got those memories. We've had that experience already. I can go back to work. I can do any kind of work and pay that off.
Oh, yeah. And when we saw our cabin, it was like
it was the nicest room we ever had in our whole trip, the whole year. Any hotel or campsite we ever stayed in, that room on the boat was the nicest. And they had great service. Like, you'd be freezing your butt off because after you leave the ship to go on those little zodiacs to go out and see the animals and see the icebergs and go watch the penguins and stuff, when you come back in, you're frozen. And they have staff on board the ship waiting for you as soon as you get off and land on the ship again with like a hot cup of tea or hot chocolate and cookies and snacks. It was great. We weren't treated so nice anywhere on our whole trip.
That's right. That was another one of the many highlights of the trip. And next, we're going to talk about one of the lowlights, one of the worst days on the trip.
Peru
just a moment.
40?
But before I do, check out my channel, and if you are so inclined, please subscribe. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and that's my next goal as far as social media is concerned. So if you haven't clicked that subscribe button, please do. And now, without further ado, worst travel day of the trip.
Are you asking me or telling me?
I think we're probably thinking of the same one.
I want to say Ruta 40.
That's the one.
Or Ruta 40.
So in Argentina, at the very southern tip, Patagonia, it's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Mountains and
Did you know there was ostriches? Because I didn't know. They're not technically ostriches. They're like a little bit smaller rheas.
Yeah.
But the first time I saw one in Bolivia, I'm like, I never knew those existed. It's wonderful to travel to new countries and new places and learn so much more than I ever knew before.
But we're traveling through Patagonia, and we've left the mountains behind. So now we're on the flat plains. It's very barren, and we're on a gravel road. And the gravel road is
shit.
It can
be. It's poop. I'm not supposed to swear.
Well, the gravel.
Before we even get there, you know those signs. If you've followed the blogs of people who travel through South America and Patagonia, you've seen that famous road sign that's a diamond shaped, and it's like a tree. It looks kind of like a palm tree, but it's bent over like 90 degrees, and it's all blowing in the wind to kind of demonstrate how strong the wind is. I don't know why they have those signs. I've never seen a palm tree in Patagonia. It doesn't look like any trees that exist there, but it conveys the message that it's really, really windy. The first time we saw one of those signs, we got off and took a picture of it because it was funny looking and because it wasn't that windy. You could get off your bike, put the kickstand down, and your bike wouldn't crash to the ground, and you could walk without fighting the wind. It didn't seem that windy, so I thought we were doing great, and maybe it wasn't really so bad, and maybe we didn't really need to worry so much.
Well, and we have been warned about high winds in Patagonia by many people. But the warning's almost like, why warn someone? Because we were going to go regardless, and people were saying, "Oh, it's so windy." Well, thank you for that, but it can't be as bad as you're describing. You think? And
it's incomprehensible. Like, until you experience it, you don't really understand how it could be that windy.
And we encountered a day. Sorry.
Thank goodness for Emilio, another guy that we met on the Stahlrat. Emilio, hi, if you're watching, and thank you so much. He gave some really good advice. He said, the wind can be really strong, but it's worse when you're stopped. If you're traveling, you can kind of give it some gas and push back into the wind. It's when you're stopped that you're defenseless, and it'll just push you right over. And he also said, go early in the morning, early, like wake up when it's still dark, do all your traveling early in the morning, get off the road by noon, and be good. But we didn't listen to him.
We didn't listen to him. We're not.
We did after.
We're not early risers, Elle and I. We don't tend to get up and go. We tend to roll out of bed when we want to. We're on vacation after all. And then we did experience 1 or 2 days of high winds, but we were on pavement.
Yeah.
And so we thought, oh, this is bad, but it's not.
And it's tough, and it feels like you're getting pushed around all day long, and then there's gusts, so you lean into it, and then the gust kind of stops. Oh, and then it comes again. So it's like a fight. It's like you're wrestling with your motorcycle all day long, and it's tiring, but for the most part, it's still doable. It's not so bad.
So we experienced high winds, and we experienced bad gravel roads, but we experienced those two things separately. The gravel roads was all this river rock. So like pebbles like this, rocks like this. And it's loosey-goosey, and it's like you're on marbles, and you kind of squiggle around a lot, and it's not fun. So that road with that kind of gravel is bad enough.
Tiring, exhausting.
The wind by itself is bad enough. And then on this particular day, the worst day that we had, we encountered them both at the same time.
Yeah. And the lady at the hotel where we were staying said, are you going to be leaving really early in the morning? Because if you want, like, we can move something so your parking isn't inhibited. And I was like, early, not really, like maybe 9:30, 10 a.m. And she went, oh, okay, no problem. Now I understand why she was asking. We were on motorcycles and we were headed south. Anybody with any smarts should have been leaving really early in the morning, just like Emilio told us to.
So we didn't do that.
No.
We're riding on pavement in high winds, and the winds are getting stronger. And then we encounter the gravel. And it's kind of funny. I was riding in front.
Yeah.
And as I'm riding, approaching the gravel, and the wind is pushing me, I hit the gravel, and I immediately got pushed 45 degrees right, like not off the road.
So instead of continuing straight, he just goes off to the side of the road. But in our intercom, I can hear him, and he's laughing. He's like, this is impossible. Ha ha. And I think there's nothing funny about that. I don't understand why you're laughing. That looks awful. I don't want to, like, I'm still on the pavement watching him do this and thinking this is impossible.
I was laughing because of how absurdly difficult and uncomfortable it was. And on the fences beside the road, there's all these guanacos.
Yeah.
And they're like llamas, and they try to jump over the fence, and sometimes they get hung up and they just die there. So there's like skeletons of these animals, and then there's the occasional reed that runs by, like ostrich.
And that's it. It's like rocks and dirt and not much else. It's pretty flat, wide open as far as you can see, dust blowing from the wind. And that's it.
I haven't made a video about this day yet. I'm waiting until my video editing skills improve a little bit, but that video is coming eventually. So if you subscribe to the channel, you'll be the first to know.
Hi, Mark and Leslie. Hey,
anyway,
Josh.
So now the winds are picking up, and we're riding, and the winds are picking up, and we encounter other motorcyclists coming the other way, and they're giving us the thumbs down.
Yeah.
So these motorcyclists, they started on the route in front of us, realized it was too bad, turned around, and came back. Like they were not having it. But we needed to keep going. And so we did. We kept going and going.
And we knew it was about 70 kilometers, and it was, I don't know, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
And we were going about 20 kilometers an hour.
If that. So the nice thing about gravel roads is when lots of vehicles go ahead of you, they kind of make little wheel wells. So there's like gravel pushed away in a bit of a more bare spot that you can ride in. So I just pointed my wheels to the one that was furthest to the right, and I started going. But then the wind pushed me over that lump into the second wheel well. And I thought, fine, I'll just stay in this one then. But then the wind pushes me over into the next one, which means I'm in the first of the left-hand side coming at where traffic could be coming at me. And I think this is no good. I need to get back on my side of the road. There's not a whole lot of traffic, but I can see some cars coming in the distance. So I just stop. I plant my feet. Take a deep breath, try to relax because I'm fighting so much. And then I crank my handlebars like 90 degrees and just push through that thick, swimmy gravel back to my side of the road. Get back in that wheel well and try going straight again. All the while you're fighting and pushing against the wind, but it doesn't matter how much you try to fight. It doesn't matter how much you push. You physically cannot stay in that wheel well. So again, the wind pushes and pushes, and every time it pushes you over that lump of thick gravel, you swim in it for a little bit, and it terrifies me and pisses me off. And then I stopped, cranked my handlebars and went back again. But then the next time I stopped completely, just like Emilio said, that's when you're most at risk. You're defenseless. And the wind decides to gust in that moment, and it just throws you to the ground. It's fast and it's hard.
It's fast and it's hard.
It's like snowboarding. If you ever snowboarded and caught an edge and you just get smashed to the ground quickly, that's what it feels like.
And normally I'm a fair bit faster on gravel roads than you are. And this day, Elle was in the front and she was leaving me literally in the dust.
I was so mad. I wanted it to be over with.
I was baffled. I was confused. I was like, wait, who are you? What have you done with my girlfriend? And how come I can't ride as fast as you can? Because I was trying to stay in my wheel wells and Elle is leaving me in the dust. Well, all of a sudden, I keep going, I keep riding, head down, right? Just one wheel rotation at a time. And that's when I see your bike on the ground in the middle of the road.
Because once I did get thrown over on the left side of the road in the middle of oncoming traffic, I'm like, whatever, there's not too many vehicles coming. They can go around and they're far off in the distance yet anyway. If I wanted to lift up my motorcycle myself on gravel, I would need to take off all my luggage first and then lift it up. So I'll just wait for Jeremy. He'll help me lift it up and then we'll go again. Jeremy's so far behind, I can barely even see him. So I literally went down into the ditch to see if there was maybe a little bit of reprieve from the wind in the ditch. But even in that gully of a ditch, there still was hardly any reprieve from the wind. So there's another dead guanaco. I laid down in the ditch beside a dead skeleton of a rotting animal and just laid there and waited till Jeremy came to get me to try to get some reprieve from the wind.
Yeah.
It never stops. It is exhausting and maddening. It just pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes and pushes you all day long.
Yeah.
So I picked up my bike and went a little further and then
crashed again.
Yeah. It's kind of inevitable.
And I was kind of still sort of laughing and still filming. And but
I tried riding in the ditch.
Oh yeah, I actually abandoned the road.
Yeah.
I decided to drive in the ditch.
So you're fighting the wind and you're fighting the gravel. Why not just leave the gravel behind and go in the ditch and ride there?
That was my strategy, and it was bad there too. And I was wiggling and getting blown around and stuff like that. So after Elle crashed again.
Yeah, the last time. So in the ditch, there's some little thistly, thorny bushes that you don't want to ride over and maybe get a flat tire from, and some big rocks that you need to avoid. But it was working for a little while. There's also a barbed wire fence. And I kept going closer and closer to the fence, thinking I want to avoid all the rocks and bushes. And I thought, well, now if the wind pushes me over, I'm going to be entangled in a barbed wire fence. This is great. I was not laughing or in any sort of good humor at all by this time.
Yeah.
So I actually made a few kilometers in the ditch, thought we might make it if we could just keep going 20 kilometers an hour, 10 kilometers an hour, we might make it out. But then I fell the last time. And the first time I fell, I was able to walk off, you know, when your bike lands, but you can kind of like run a couple steps underneath you and still like stay upright. I tried to do that, but the wind gusted again. And I swear it felt as strong as if somebody just put two hands on my shoulder blades and shoved me. So I flattened onto the ground. I smashed my hands and hurt the palms of my hands. My face, I'm wearing a helmet still, but my face bounced off the ground. And then I just lost my poop completely. I was yelling. I was picking up rocks and just hucking them. I hate this stupid road and I hate this stupid everything. Stupid. And in the middle
this was on the
yelling,
intercom.
I tried to yell and my voice just kind of cracked and I started crying. And then I was mad at myself for crying. I'm like, no, I don't want to cry. I want to be mad. And I couldn't. And I just cried and cried and cried. And Jeremy was like, ooh. So I ripped the communication system off from the side of my helmet and I threw that to the ground. And I just kneeled on the ground and cried at the same time as the wind continuing to push the whole time. And then after I got all de-snotted and de-teared-faced, which was probably a good 10 minutes, then I looked at Jeremy and I said, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore today at all. And he started to argue a little bit or like suggest that we keep going.
I like to think that I wasn't arguing, but I was trying to encourage you to continue because at this point we were about 35 kilometers into our 70-kilometer stretch of gravel. And I knew that it was just going to be such a hassle putting that tent up in the wind. I'm not kidding. Like the wind was gusting at over 100 kilometers an hour.
I wasn't measuring it. I don't know. It was insane. It was more than I've ever experienced.
I don't want to exaggerate, but I think the winds there can gust of over 100 kilometers an hour. Somebody who's watching can probably back me up on this. And it was like hard to stand. And then I thought, how are we setting up a tent?
Like truly, you could have a hard time walking. As soon as you lifted one foot up, the wind pushed it. And then until you plant that foot, and then you lift your other foot and the wind pushes it over too. It was a struggle to just exist in that wind. And Jeremy mentioned that it's going to be hell to try to put up the tent. And I didn't care. I literally said, I'll sleep without the tent. I will keep all my gear on and I will just lay down in the ditch beside the dead Monaco. And I mean, even if we don't sleep the whole night, even if I just have a couple hours rest, but we know that we've been told that the wind usually lightens up in the morning and gets worse in the afternoon and evening. And now it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's not going to get any better today. Why don't we just lay down and wait? And tomorrow morning, when the wind lightens up, hopefully, then we get the hell out of here.
So up until this point, I still hadn't dropped my bike on this day. But then we tried to find a place to put our tent up. And so I got onto your bike and I was
to ride it out of the ditch and up onto the road again.
And the wind just knocked me over too. So that's when I was like, yeah.
And then one of my pieces of luggage broke. The little connection where it locks on to the luggage rack snapped. So great. Now we have to try to fight to put up a tent and to fight to keep it from being blown away and do repairs in the middle of this wind.
So setting up the tent in that wind must have, like, if I was watching it, it must have looked hilarious. It sure didn't seem very fun and very happy. And God bless you, Elle wasn't at this moment being super engaged in the process.
Nope.
She was kind of outside of herself. So it came down to me to get the motorcycles. I set them up as kind of a windbreak.
I brought stuff when you were like, bring me all the heavy stuff you can bring. We'll put it inside the tent to keep it from being blown away. I brought all the luggage and then I just threw my body in and laid down in the tent.
Yeah, so we couldn't get the tent up, right, because of the wind. So, and we couldn't anchor it because it was just too windy. So that's what we did, was we threw heavy things into the tent. And
all of our luggage.
And then we staked it down and we used the motorcycles.
Yeah. So the kickstands of the motorcycles on top of rocks, on top of the corners of the fly.
And then we crawled in to this tent and we both just immediately passed out. Like our helmets were still on.
Yeah.
We just clunk.
Yeah. We didn't unroll our sleeping bags or anything. We just crunched up with knees bent and lay down and slept for probably half an hour, an hour.
Yeah. That was the worst day to date.
And guess what day that was?
Oh, that was my birthday.
Yeah.
That was my birthday.
Yeah.
So after we took a little power nap, the wind is still raging. We get out of our tent.
We had some peanuts.
We go walk around.
We had some water and we had some cold pizza. So we had a little bit of peanuts and some water.
We had some water, yep.
And then we walked around a little bit.
And that was great, actually.
We saw some other people who were stuck. We saw a truck with a flat tire, like a completely destroyed tire on that stupid gravel road.
There were a few, 3 Israeli young ladies traveling the world for the first time, and they didn't know how to change a tire on their rental vehicle. And so we gave them a hand with that. Well, we were standing, someone else was helping them at that point. Yeah. And we just walked around and we saw
they drove off and then we walked as if we were the only people in the world because it felt like we were after that. And then we saw a fox and we saw an armadillo. It was so cute and it came right up to us. I thought it would be scared and run away. And it just like snuggled right up to our boots, probably looking to hide behind our feet for some shelter from the wind.
Yep. It was actually a magical night. And then at like around 8:30 or 9 p.m., you were crashed out sleeping.
No problem.
Sleeping. And then the wind died down. And I momentarily thought about waking you up and saying, all right, we're going to pack up and we're leaving. But instead, I just went to sleep as well. And
it was dark by then or getting dark?
It was getting dark. And we woke up at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning.
I think it was like 5 a.m. because the wind, even though it slowed down in the evening, it continues. And the sound of your tent going rah, 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 against your head and all the sides of the tent just being batted around all night long is noisy. And then when that stops, the silence is actually what wakes you up because it's so strange and so different and new. So when we woke up and the wind stopped, I just grabbed Jeremy. I'm like, no, we need to leave right now. Like, don't even pack properly. Just grab everything, throw it all in, and let's get off this stupid gravel section.
I've never seen you so motivated in my entire life.
We packed up fast that morning.
We packed up super fast and we hit the road and then we found a hostel.
Yeah.
And then we went and saw That's when we saw Fitzroy. We won't talk about our whole trip.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to mention a couple of highlights, which we
Mm-hmm.
did. The Stalrut,
Mm-hmm.
the Antarctic,
Mm-hmm.
and then a couple of lowlights, and that was the hardest travel day.
Mm-hmm.
There were others as well.
Mm-hmm.
I crashed a couple of times, once at speed.
Yeah, he crashed good. Like I've tipped over or dropped my bike more than a few times, but there was one actual like tumble.
That was also in southern South America.
In Tierra del Fuego.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how fast I was going. I know that I was going between 70 kilometers an hour and 40 kilometers an hour. I was going in that range, but the riding was so kind of occupying that I didn't look at my speedometer when all of a sudden I hit the ground. So it was in that zone.
And then you bashed up your panniers and luggage racks, right?
Yeah.
So there was some work to do to unbend and reshape some of that.
Yeah, that's still work to be doing.
Hey, Terry.
Hey, Terry.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a question here. Would you take the same bikes if you were to ride the same route again? If yes, why? If no, why? So for me, I say that I ride a Kawasaki KLR 650 because I don't have a lot of money and I'm not a good mechanic. So I don't love the KLR. It's just the bike that I can afford. And it's a bike that will kind of do everything. And it's a bike that people can fix all over the globe. It's fuel injected. It's a very simple machine. So if I had more money, I would probably get a different motorcycle. But that being said, I have nothing really bad to say about the KLR. It's the laughing stock of the off-road motorcycle community, and I don't mind. I don't care.
And there's a cult following. Lots of people love it.
Lots of people do love it, and
it's easier to sell in Uruguay if you ever need to do that.
I don't get too attached to my KLRs. I've had like 4 of them now, and I just view them as like a really expensive hammer. So it's a tool that I use, and I don't typically fall in love with it. I can let them go. I can't say that this is my last KLR that I'll ever own.
They don't make them anymore.
They don't make them anymore, but I've never, except for this one, I've never purchased a new one. Yeah. So yes, for me, I would take the same motorcycle, but I'm open to other models and other makes and stuff like that too.
I'd say the same. If I was to go back in time and be the same me at the same age, I would still take the same bike. I have BMW 700 GS, and I am even more happy after doing this trip because I got to compare to Jeremy's. So we would travel the same roads, the same route, the same amount, the same day, and then fill up at the gas station. And when we were up in higher elevations, I kicked ass in fuel efficiency. Like at the highest of elevations, I want to say close, even getting close to double the fuel efficiency.
Oh yeah.
Back down here at sea level, not so much, still better, but fuel injected, I was so happy to have that once I saw how much gas he was pumping into his carbureted machine and how he chugged a little bit at the higher elevations.
And the power. So all of a sudden, like I typically ride faster than you do, even on pavement, right? So, but then all of a sudden on days when we're like at 10,000 feet elevation or like 8,000 feet, really high up, all of a sudden Elle's like right behind me. And it's because my KLR was maxed. And I couldn't go any faster.
And I was like, hey, what's going on? How come you're so slow? That's it. That's all I had.
I'm downshifting. I'm trying to go and I'm leaning over.
I am very happy with my bike. Earlier trips than this one, I went down to South America, to Central America and back, and I got stuck in Costa Rica one time because my bike sensed that there was a fault somewhere. But the thing that it does is it just shuts down. So because my BMW has a computer, you need a computer to read any fault codes and to understand what any issues are and to potentially fix anything, which is a pain in the butt. Because the problem that happened was just that one wire was getting rubbed. All I needed to do was wrap a little bit of electrical tape around that wire and I would have been fine, but I didn't know that's what the problem was. So now I carry one of those GS911 tools, which was lent to me by Matt at Motology School. Thank you for that. And because I was carrying one with me, probably I didn't need it at all this trip, but it's a little bit more finicky because there's a computer and fuel injection. So I still love my bike. I would choose it again. If I was going to do another trip in, let's say, 5 years from now, I might choose something smaller and lighter. I'm getting old. My muscles are not what they used to be. I could do push-ups all day long and I'll still never have the biceps that Jeremy does, which really pisses me off. And the older I get, the more of a struggle it is for me to pick a heavy bike and manage a big, fat, heavy bike. So if I look for a new bike after this one, it will probably be smaller and lighter.
And yet you still get more and more beautiful.
Aw, good answer.
There was something else I was going to say that I just lost my train of thought here. We're talking about motorcycles and
Yes.
maybe
Quarantine.
there's a lesson I shouldn't interrupt when you're on a roll.
Flight home.
Yep.
Do you want to talk about our weird and wild flight pattern, or we already touched on it, so that's enough?
Yeah, you know what? I think we're going to wrap it up here. Check the description below for a bunch of links to my articles and things like that. I've got more videos as well. Please click subscribe. It's super helpful. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. Don't go. Oh, don't go yet. Don't go yet. That's what I wanted to say. We're not sponsored riders, but we did have some gifts given to us by sponsors. So thank you to Motology School for giving us the communication system. Thank you to Atlas Throttle Locks for the Atlas Throttle Locks. And
Rock Straps.
Right.
I've personally gotten some good stuff from you guys. Thank you so much for Rock Straps Canada.
That's right. I haven't gotten anything from Rock Straps Canada, but we like the company. We like the product.
Yes. And we brought extras and used them. We're glad to have them.
So I think we're going to leave it there. Check out our links below. I've got links to Adventure Rider Radio, Canada Moto Guide for some articles that I've written, my Instagram and my Twitter, of course, Elle's Instagram, and books. So if you want to support me, the best way to do that is to check out Motorcycle Therapy. Ask for it at your local bookstore. If you can't find it at your local bookstore, then buy it online. And let us know if you want to see any more of these live streams. We have more stories to tell. We could actually get more specific and just tell like 1 or 2 stories next time, maybe. And what else do you want to say? Oh, my website.
I want to say hi to Dan. Dan is someone we might touch base with yet.
Okay.
I felt like quarantine buddies with Dan too, because he was just in Brazil while we were in Uruguay. And I knew he was one of the other bikers in South America that was waiting and hoping to leave. And I think you're still in Brazil right now. Hopefully, one way or another, somehow you get back home and save money for another trip, which is hopefully what our plan is too, right? That's a question here. What's next? What's next is we're broke. So we have to go back to work and make money again. But hopefully by the time we have saved enough money, the world is open to travel again, and there will be more. Somewhere, somehow, some way, we'll go again.
That's it.
That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Subscribe. Check us out. Talk to you later. Click that. Okay. Bye-bye.